Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take complex source material and, well, we extract the critical knowledge so you can get up to speed fast.
Today we're tackling a subject that has really become central to our modern buildings, mold contamination.
It's everywhere in the news.
It is. And whether you're a property owner, a facility manager, or, just trying to figure out a renovation, the risk of moisture and microbial growth it's just very real.
And because public awareness around the health impacts is rising so quickly, the industry has been forced to completely overhaul its playbook.
It has.
So our source material today is dense, but it's absolutely essential. We're looking at the 4th edition of the ANSI IICRC S520. That's the official standard for professional mold remediation, just published this year, 2024.
And this document, it really tries to bridge the gap between building science, mycology, and just practical on-the-ground application. It brings together core scientific principles with, mandatory procedures.
Right. And our mission here is to distill the most important takeaways for you. We're going to focus on two big things. First, the huge philosophical shifts in how we even define contamination.
And second, the mandatory practices, the shall statements that dictate how this work must be done professionally.
Let's start with that big philosophical change because it really sets the stage for everything else.
To really appreciate the 2024 S520, you kind of have to look at the problem it was designed to solve. Historically, a lot of the guidance documents really relied on visible evidence.
So if I saw a patch of mold on a wall, my reaction was just based on the size of that patch. Like, under 10 square feet, do one thing, over 10, do something else.
Precisely. That was the old way of thinking, but it was deeply flawed.
Why?
Well, it ignored two massive problems. First, all the contamination that's hidden, inside a wall cavity or under the floor.
The stuff you can't see.
The stuff you can't see. And second, it didn't account for the contamination that isn't even actively growing anymore. The invisible dispersed spores and fragments that settle on every single surface.
So the new standard throws out that reliance on visual size.
It does. It replaces it with a system based on 3 defined environmental conditions. This is the foundation of the whole document.
Okay, walk us through them. What's condition 1?
Condition 1 is the goal. It's your baseline. The standard calls it a normal fungal ecology.
Which means?
It just means the indoor environment is clean, it's dry, and it has the low level of settled or airborne spores you'd expect to find in any healthy space. It's the after picture.
Okay, so that's the goal. Then you have the source of the problem.
Right. That's condition 3. This is the presence of actual mold growth. And crucially, it doesn't have to be visible and it doesn't have to be active.
It can be dormant or even dead.
Exactly. Condition 3 includes active, dormant, dead, visible, or hidden mold growth. It's the source.
And this is where the biggest shift in the new edition comes in, with condition 2. What does that cover now?
Condition 2 it's a huge deal. It's the area that is contaminated by residual material from a known condition 3 source.
So the fallout zone.
A great way to put it. And the 2024 update massively expanded this definition. Condition 2 now explicitly includes airborne components, the presence of mycotoxins, and something called ECM.
And ECM is extracellular material.
That's right. Basically, the byproducts that molds create, the allergens, the irritants. By spelling out that these invisible things, mycotoxins and ECM, are part of condition 2, the standard is telling the industry something critical.
Not that.
Your job is not done when the visible mold is gone.
That distinction is monumental for you if you're the property owner.
Yeah.
It means a good remediation isn't just scrubbing a wall.
Not at all. It means meticulous cleaning of everything. Surfaces, air ducts, the whole area, to remove those microscopic, often toxic byproducts. It means a much larger scope of work.
So if a remediator finds condition 3, the source,
they must assume condition 2 exists in the surrounding area. And they have to clean all that residual contamination to get the entire space back to condition 1.
Which leads us directly into the second major mandate in the standard, Principle 1.4, which is about contamination removal. And this is a shall statement, right?
Yeah.
A mandatory requirement.
It is. The S520 states very clearly that physically removing mold contamination is the primary means of remediation. This is the bedrock of the standard of care.
Okay, so let's say a remediation company comes in and tells you they're just going to kill the mold or spray something on it and that's it. That sounds like a major deviation.
That is exactly what the document is saying. It's explicit. Any approach that tries to kill, encapsulate, or inhibit mold instead of physically removing it, Well, it's just not adequate.
So if they just spray, fog, or foam something without then physically wiping, brushing, and HEPA vacuuming.
They are deviating from the S520 standard, period.
Let's get practical, because you see products on the shelf all the time that promise a quick fix. What about chemical sprays or biocides?
They should not be used as the primary method. They can be supplemental, but the physical material, the fungal growth and debris, that has to be cleaned away first. Indiscriminate use of antimicrobials is explicitly not recommended.
An encapsulation, just painting over it. It seems so easy.
And it's a critical misuse of the process. You should never use encapsulation or fungicidal coatings as a substitute for cleaning condition 3 mold.
Why not?
You're trapping moisture, you're trapping the food source, you're basically giving the mold a perfect little terrarium to keep growing, just hidden under a layer of paint.
So those coatings are only for after the fact?
Only on surfaces that have already been cleaned, dried, and verified to be in condition 1. Then you can use them to, say, lock down trace residue or deter future growth.
The standard also seems to proactively shut down a lot of the magic bullet solutions you see advertised.
Oh, absolutely. That list is a mandatory exclusion. Things like ozone gas, hydroxyl radical generators, UV lights.
Or just fogging the whole house with a disinfectant.
Right. None of those should be used as an alternative to physical removal. If a company says they'll solve your mold problem just by running a machine, they are operating outside the S520 standard of care.
This brings us back to condition 2 and mycotoxins. We know they're invisible, they're toxic byproducts. If physical removal is king, what about just destroying the toxins themselves with chemicals?
This is a really nuanced but important point. The standard says mycotoxins can be effectively removed using the exact same processes that remove the mold growth and the other particulates.
So the physical cleaning lifts them away.
The cleaning action physically lifts them. But here's the key technical part. No chemical process alone, like ionization or oxidation, is currently known to reliably destroy the molecular structure of all mycotoxins to the point where you achieve condition 1.
Wow. So even for the smallest, most toxic components, the only proven method is physical cleaning. You have to scrub and HEPA vac the entire space.
You have to. The standard demands proof that the physical bioburden has been lifted, and that includes everything defined under condition 2.
Okay. Let's pivot to the people involved, because the S520 really defines the roles and responsibilities. We have the remediator and the IEP.
The remediator is the company doing the work. They handle the safety, the containment, the physical cleaning. They can do an initial preliminary determination based on what they can see.
So they can see the visible mold, the condition 3.
Correct. And they can assume condition 2 exists, but, and this is key, they can't formally confirm it themselves. They are the workers, but they can't sign off on their own work, so to speak.
And if they do assume condition 2 exists, what happens?
They shall disclose that assumption in writing to you, the client, the materially interested party, or MIP. It's their justification for the deep cleaning that needs to happen.
But to actually confirm it with testing, you need someone else.
You need the indoor environmental professional, or IEP.
The technical expert, the assessor.
Exactly. The IEP is the person with the specialized knowledge and experience to perform the formal assessment, which might include sampling, and the final verification, which is called post-remediation verification, or PRV.
And it's important to note, right, that IEP isn't a specific certificate from the IICRC. It's a description of expertise.
Yes. It requires demonstrated competence through study, through experience. It's a professional designation, not just a weekend course.
Which brings up a huge administrative rule about independence. What if the IEP works for the remediation company?
The standard is very clear on this. When a PRV or a detailed assessment is needed, the IEP should be unbiased and independent.
And if they're not?
If they work for the same company, this shall be disclosed in writing to you, the client, as a deviation from the standard.
That's a huge protection against a conflict of interest.
It is. It's there so you know that the person checking the work doesn't have a vested interest in passing it.
Speaking of risk, I understand the revision process for the S520 uncovered a widespread vulnerability in the industry around insurance.
It really did. It's a warning shot for contractors. The finding was that most mold remediation firms are actually not correctly insured.
How is that possible?
Standard commercial general liability policies. They almost universally have exclusions for mold and microbial growth. So firms think they're covered, but when a claim comes in, they find out they're completely exposed.
So if you're hiring a company, you need to make sure they have a specialty pollution liability policy.
Absolutely. The S520 strongly recommends customized insurance packages tailored for mold remediation. It puts the burden on the remediator to manage their risk, which ultimately protects you.
And on that administrative side, the paperwork has to be solid.
It shall be. Contracts need to be written, detailed, scope, price, payment terms. But most importantly, any agreed-upon limitations or deviations from the standard have to be documented in writing.
Like if the client refuses to pay for an independent IEP to do the clearance testing.
Exactly. That has to be in writing, disclosed to the client. It protects everyone.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the work itself. How do they control the spread of all this contamination?
It comes down to Principle 1.3, contamination control. The spread of Condition 3 and 2 material should be controlled as close to the source as possible, and that requires mandatory engineering controls.
This is where we see the big plastic containment barriers.
That's right. Critical barriers, usually 6mm poly sheeting, are mandatory to seal off the work area. And inside that containment, the remediator shall establish and maintain negative pressure.
Explain why that's so critical. What is negative pressure doing?
It's the mechanism that makes sure air only flows into the containment and never out. You want any leaks to pull clean air in, not push contaminated air out into the rest of the building.
And there's a minimum requirement for that pressure differential.
There is. The minimum recommended is -5 pascals, or -5. That's equivalent to about -0.02 inches water column. It's a tiny amount of pressure, but it's critical.
And you create that pressure using air filtration devices, AFDs. We usually call them air scrubbers.
Right. And those AFDs should be HEPA filtered. This is where the standard gets really specific.
Okay, define HEPA for us in this context.
HEPA means high-efficiency particulate air. It's a standard, not a brand. The filter must remove a minimum of 99.97% of all airborne particles at the 0.3 micron size.
Why that specific number, 0.3 microns?
Because that size is what's known as the most penetrating particle size, or MPPS. It's counterintuitive, but it's the particle size that is hardest for a filter to catch.
Harder than smaller particles.
Yes. Bigger particles get caught easily. Very, very small particles move randomly. It's called Brownian motion, and they eventually hit and stick to the filter fibers. But that 0.3 micron size is in a sort of sweet spot of being the hardest to trap. So if the filter can capture 99.97% of those, it's even better at capturing everything else.
That context is incredibly helpful, and it explains why the standard says you have to use a HEPA vacuum and you should avoid a regular shop vac or home vacuum.
Exactly. Those consumer-grade vacuums can't guarantee capture of the Condition 2 particulates. They might just exhaust them right back into the air.
Okay, one last work practice. Sometimes you see workers misting or fogging inside the containment. What's that for?
That's usually for dust suppression, or what the standard calls knockdown. It makes heavy dust fall to the floor while they're demolishing materials. But, and this is a shall, the resulting wet residue must be physically cleaned up. It's a control method, not a cleaning method.
Let's finish up with maybe the most difficult challenge for you as the property owner. Your stuff, your personal contents.
Content remediation, yes.
Wow.
The standard gives you 3 categories for your belongings: restore, dispose, or preserve.
Restore means cleaning them back to Condition 1. Dispose is obvious. What's the decision process?
It's a professional judgment call. You have to weigh the material. Is it porous like a book or non-porous like a glass plate? The depth of contamination, and frankly, the cost of cleaning versus the item's value.
And that third category, preserve.
Yeah.
That sounds like where the heartache is.
It really is. Preserve is for irreplaceable items. Think family heirlooms, important documents, things that physically cannot be returned to Condition 1 because the fungal growth is too deep or the material is too fragile.
So what happens to them?
They're stabilized, but they must be contained and labeled as contaminated because they simply cannot meet that strict Condition 1 standard.
Wow. So this S520 standard has it's fundamentally changed the entire conversation about mold.
It has.
It's no longer about just making the visible problem go away. It's about a mandatory physical removal process to eliminate the invisible toxic load of Conditions 2 and 3. It gives everyone a legally defensible framework.
It sets a very high but very clear bar for what success looks like.
Yeah.
It ties real science directly to mandatory work practices.
The S520 establishes that returning a space to Condition 1 means materials have to be visibly clean and dry and reflect that normal fungal ecology. But as we just talked about with that preserve category, we know some irreplaceable items just can't physically get there.
And that leaves us with this. this lingering dilemma. The standard highlights it, but it can't fully resolve it.
No.
How do we balance a stringent scientific standard of care, which demands 99.97% removal of tiny particles, against the immense sentimental or historical value of an object that just can't withstand that level of aggressive cleaning?
That tension
Yeah.
between the hard science and human sentiment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really complex challenge that every property owner might have to face.
It is. It remains an ongoing consideration.
A really fascinating and critical deep dive into the mandatory minimums of professional remediation. Thank you for walking us through the S520.
It was my pleasure.